All right. How is everybody doing tonight? Let me tell you what the question is right now. It is 70 some odd degrees outside and there's not a cloud in the sky. That's probably where everybody is right now. Well, if it's hot in here, we'll get Hugh on to cut the air on. I didn't cut it on tonight. I didn't want to freeze anybody. So, how's everyone? I hope everyone is having a good week. A couple of things definitely want to update you with. Charles, if you saw the message come through, Charles is in ICU at Redmond. He's not doing well. Not sure if I think it's probably something that's probably been caused by the chemo, but they're giving him a lot of blood and a lot of platelets right now. So that's what they're pumping him full of. We're going to go back down tomorrow to check on him. We were actually in the room with him when they came and got him and took him to ICU. So definitely remember Charles in the prayer, because I think he's at the end of his chemo. And so it's just now trying to get back to health and stuff. So I definitely remember him. Of course, remember Janita and the whole West family and everybody who's related to them in there. It was good to see Roger and Sarah Sunday, if y'all got to see them. So that was great. Who else do we need to remember in our prayers? Anybody? Anybody with allergies? Yes, that is true. I have my tea over here ready to go with that. Yes, pollen season is beginning, so good luck for the next month or two for all of us that are struggling with that. I don't know. I know that where the fires were a couple of days ago, there was still some distance, but I don't know of recent time. But yes, they are out there, and some of the fires, I know that they lit fires, I think today on John's Mountain, that was supposed to be a controlled burn to try to help take down, but we're also under a high fire warning right now in our area, so don't go out back and have a bonfire right now. So they're trying to control it, so I don't know. I don't know for sure. But anything else? Let's have a word of prayer and dive into our text tonight. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for this wonderful day that you've given us, for another day to live and breathe, and Father, to be able to praise your name. And Father, we are mindful of Charles as he is in ICU, and we're praying that you will be with him and the doctors and the nurses. And Father, we pray that you will be with them as they are taking care of him and bring Charles back to health, and know that he has lots of people who love him and praying for him. And Father, we just ask you to continue to pray and to be with Janita and the whole West family and the time that they're still healing from. And we pray that you will watch over them and comfort them. We are grateful for our time together to be able to study and to learn more about you and how you interacted with people. And Father, we are grateful for our study tonight, and we just pray that you will bless it. And we thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, we are in chapter 31 still of Genesis. This tonight, probably not going to be a lot of deep diving in there. There's going to be a couple of spaces that we will get to tonight, but this is kind of in a section here where things just kind of slowly get going until we finally get really to chapter 37, and that's when Joseph pops in and kind of starts the next little section of Genesis. But there are some things here I do want to point out. So where we were last week when we ended, this is when Jacob had finally had enough of being up there with Laban, and he waited for the time for them to come shear the sheep, and he takes his wives, takes the animals, takes everything he has, and takes off. And so Laban is mad, and where we ended last time, Laban had caught up to him and made it to that place. So where we are in verse 25, Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched his tents in the country of Gilead. So you kind of have this standoff that's happened here. But look at what Laban says here in verse 36. Laban says to Jacob, "What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I may have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourines and lyres? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm." So let's stop right there before we go any further in here. Anybody find it odd of what Laban is saying back in verse 26 when he's saying, "What have you done"? Anybody find that ironic? What's the irony in this, Ken? What he had already done to Jacob. So there's the irony. Remember back in chapter 29 when he's been waiting for Leah or waiting for Rachel, and he gets Leah, and then finally he wakes up that morning, figures out it's Leah and it's not Rachel, and he says, "What have you done? Why have you done this to me?" And here's the irony now is the shoe is on the other foot, proverbially, shall we say. And so Laban is in this point. But look at Laban's, and pay attention to what Laban's grievance is. "You have tricked me." What has Laban been doing for 20 years? Okay. And notice how he says this. "You have driven away my daughters like captives of the sword." What is he saying? He stole them. Okay, so that's kind of the impression you get, that he stole them against his will, but how does he identify them? They're his daughters. Are they his daughters? Okay, there you go. So he doesn't acknowledge that these are his wives. He is putting it in the context of, "You have stolen my family away from me, and you have done all of this." Well, like Laban still had control over this, and that mindset is, you've taken them against their will. Now, he doesn't understand, if you remember from last week, what was their mindset? What was Leah and Rachel's mindset? Or from earlier in this chapter. We're going with Jacob. And they recognize that their dad has treated them pretty rough over these 20 years and treated them like they're just property. And so, in fact, I remember, and this is going to come up in a second, Rachel stole one of his gods out of his house. So remember that. That will come up later. So yes, Laban's under the mindset with this, and that's why he makes the statement, "You have done foolishly." In fact, he says this, verse 27. Let's go back to verse 27. "You've secretly done this. You tricked me. You didn't tell me." He said, basically, "I could have thrown you a party." Well, he's already done that before. Laban's done that already, remember? And that was kind of the situation even when Leah is married. Verse 28, "You didn't let me kiss my sons and my daughters farewell." So he's even looking at the sons of Leah and Rachel as his own. So Laban is if we're going to determine this, we would probably, in today's term, we would call him a serious narcissist here. He is about control. He is about losing control at this point, and he is struggling with knowing how to answer this and what's happening here. So he says, verse 29, "It is in my power to do you harm." So under the rules that you find in this time, especially probably the latest ones that we have is from, or earliest ones we have is from the Code of Hammurabi, if someone has stolen your family or stolen property from you, then you're allowed to kill them or put them back as an indentured service. So, but look at what he says. "But the God of your father." Now that's interesting here because we don't separate in English a plural you versus a singular you. This is where you would, if we good Southern English would come in here and say, "The God of y'all's father." This is in plural. The you here is in plural form. So he is acknowledging that Rachel and Leah and these servants and everybody with them are following Jacob's God at this point. But he says, the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Oh. What is Laban's real issue here? He stole his kids, so partly, I think when you break down what Laban is saying, I don't have anybody to take care of my property and my sheep and my herds like I had for the last 20 years. Because remember, even we talked about this last week, for the last 20 years, anything Jacob was doing was turning out good because of God. Well, guess what? Now all of that's gone. And ultimately, he is also saying, you have stolen something from me and my house. So this is, of course, going to make Jacob upset. Look at verse 31. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. And he's not talking about the God part, but he's talking about leaving of where he was. I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. Do you see a change in Jacob already? Do you think Jacob would have been this way 14 years ago, or even 20 years ago? Probably not. You remember, he's still pretty strong. He was cunning. He was manipulative in a lot of ways. But he has been, in this process, you see a changed man happening. And we will see that further in his relationship with God in just a moment. But he is now in a place of, I thought I was afraid of what you were going to do. And so I did this and I got away, that you're going to take your daughters from me and basically kill me. Verse 32, anyone with whom you in the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it. What is he saying? What is Jacob saying here? Okay, he doesn't recognize that somebody stole this. Because remember, and that's what the end of the next little section says, is Rachel's the one who stole it. So Rachel, you're the one stealing gods all over the place. But, so he is pretty much kind of, adamant, look, if anybody has stolen something, we will kill them. That goes back to that code as well. Not knowing what he's saying here because of Rachel's situation and because she's the one who took it. But he is basically saying, you're challenging my character. You have free reign, go through my entire camp. If there's anything that's yours, you're welcome to take it. What does that also include? Not just gods, but what else would it include, do you think? Because this is something that is left out of this prominently, and Jacob will bring back in a moment. What else does Jacob have with him besides wives, servants? We got livestock. Notice he ain't saying anything about the livestock in this. Well, because he knows this deal that he made with Jacob originally, Jacob doesn't have anything missing in here. So Jacob hasn't taken anything. So the idea is if you can go through here and find this God, you'll be good. Of course, that last little section, Rachel had stolen them. So look at verse 33 now. Laban goes in Jacob's tent. And then he goes into Leah's tent. He goes into the tent of the two female servants, and he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and goes into Rachel's tent. Now, Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. So here's what she is doing, sneaking around. And she is going to use womanhood in here in just a second to hide it. Okay, but so Rachel has it, but she's cunning enough to know I can't leave it in here. So she is sitting here, I have the idol, and I'm sitting on it where I am now. So here we are. Verse 34, Rachel had taken the household gods, put it in the camel's saddle. Laban felt all about the tent, but he did not find her. And she said to her father, let not my Lord be angry that I cannot rise before you For the way of the woman is upon me. She is in the middle of her menstrual cycle. And to touch her, even in a non-God, Jehovah God way, was deemed unclean, was deemed, you do not do this. And so she is basically preempting him coming and checking the saddle by saying, I can't get off the saddle and bow to you and honor you as my dad because I'm in the middle of my cycle here, and you're not allowed to touch me. So she is using what she has to hide this God that she has kept here. And we're into that verse of verse 35. So he searched, but did not find the household gods. So Jacob is now vindicated in this situation because I didn't take it. Laban, you've lost your mind here. So verse 36. Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? So he has turned it on. He's turned it around because he has been proven his character is correct. Why are you coming after me like you're ready to kill me in this sense? And now look at Jacob's argument. For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it before my kinsmen and your kinsmen that they may decide between the two of us. Notice what Jacob is saying. I'm so confident in what I have. Whatever you think is yours, put it in the middle here. Both our kinsmen will hear. They will be the judge and the jury and decide what it is. That's how confident Jacob is at this point. Verse 38. These 20 years I have been with you. So now you finally see Jacob. He's definitely getting a little upset. Your ewes, and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. He is basically, look at what he is setting up saying. I have taken so good care of your flock that when they were even pregnant, I made sure they didn't miscarry. I made sure to take care of them throughout their entire pregnancy and to make sure they gave birth to everything that was here. And in doing so, I had every right to probably go eat rams, but I didn't do it. Verse 39. What was torn by a wild beast, I did not bring to you. I bore the loss myself. From my hand, you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. So under the law, under their codes that they had there, if a wild beast would attack an animal, it was the owner of the animal's responsibility to take care of it. What does Jacob say? I cared for you so much, I didn't bring it to you. I took care of it. Basically, he replaced it. He took care of that situation. And he says, you've accused me of stealing. I've never stolen anything. Verse 40. There I was by day and by night, and heats consumed me, and the cold by night, and fled my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Oh, that's that statement that we had that backed up earlier when he talked to his daughters about, hey, your dad's really robbed me. Everything I've tried to do, I've sat here, and he's trying to make an argument. And who's listening to this? The whole family, kinsmen. It's not just Rachel and Leah, and it's not just their kids. It is kinsmen on both sides. And he's doing this on purpose because he doesn't want anything to be misconstrued. And I think it's going to what it's going to end up doing here, it's going to force Laban to basically make a deal between them two. So, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Where has Jacob come in his faith now? Where's Jacob come over these 20 years? We have gone from, if God takes care of me, to God has taken care of me. And I acknowledge that. and you would have stiffed me, Laban, if it was not for my God. There's a dual nature thing that is happening here because Laban has these fake gods, right? And Jacob is talking about Jehovah God, and basically he's saying, my God took care of me over anybody else's. So Jacob is coming to a true faith, and you begin to see this even more, his spiritual transformation that changed. So let's jump on down here to verse 43. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. See, all that you see is mine. Wow. Laban has really, and this is what happens when you're dealing with somebody of Laban's personality, challenges that he has. When they lose control, they will squeeze even more, if that makes sense. And that is what he is doing. He is totally rejecting everything Jacob has said because he's trying to set up something here in just a second. He says, these are my kids, these are my grandkids, these are my flocks. They're not yours. Laban is a control freak. So, he's a wealth freak, okay? Yes. Mm-hmm. He wants it all back. Yes. Yep. Well, his kinsmen's got to go back home with him and everything. The ones who came with him to come attack him. Yes. Yes. Because look at what he says here. But here's what I can do. This is back in 43, second half. But what I can do this day for these my daughters or for their children whom they have borne, what can I do? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. He's basically, like Rachel just said here, he's now the benevolent person. Oh, I own all these, but I will let you take them. Let's make a covenant. Let's shake and make a deal on this. So Jacob takes a stone, set it up as a pillar. Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones, and they took stones and made a heap, and there they ate there by the heap. Laban called it, see if I can say this right, Hagar Sahadutha. Jacob called it Galid. So both mean the same thing. It means the heap that's here. The witness is a heap. Laban is using what would have probably been more of an Armenian term, and Jacob is using probably a Canaanite term that's in here. But they mean the heap of witness here between you and me today. Therefore he named it Galid and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. So Laban is setting up this place of saying, Jacob, I'm about to make you a deal, but know that the gods are watching. And that if you violate what I'm saying, they are watching. I may not know, but they're watching what we're doing here. And so basically he's trying to guilt trip Jacob in here. He says, if you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is my witness between you and me. So notice what he is saying here. If you oppress my daughters, is he oppressing his kids? No. Who was actually oppressing the kids? Laban was. Is Jacob going to take another wife? No. What was part of the reason of going to Laban? Because his mom wanted him to get it from their family, not a Canaanite woman, which goes back to Abraham. So he's not going to take anything like this. And so this is just kind of an empty threat with things taking place. So verse 51, Laban says to Jacob, see this heap and this pillar, which I have set between you and me. The heap is a witness and the pillar is a witness that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap, this pillar to me to do harm. So basically, Laban's afraid here, I think. Laban's afraid of Jacob coming back and taking things. Now, it's interesting, verse 53. Now, you got to kind of parse through it, and I don't necessarily know that we don't write it in the right way in our English here. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their fathers judge between us. He's not talking in every single one of these instances about Yahweh. Okay? This goes back all the way to Ur of Chaldees. So the God of Abraham, that's Yahweh, right? That's Jehovah God. The God of Nahor is who? Okay, so we're jumping further back, right? So did he worship God? Not according to Joshua 24, which goes back further to that last little section there where it says the God of their fathers. If you go to Joshua 24, when they're talking about that they're in the land of Ur of Chaldees, they are worshiping multiple gods back in those days. So Laban is using what Jacob is following and then what they follow and putting it all together. That's why I said in your English, it probably in those last two should not be a capital G. It should be a lowercase g that's in there. So just one of those little things that pop out. So look at what Jacob did. Jacob swears by the fear of his father Isaac, which is talking about God. And Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. And they ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned home. So here's Laban basically running home, and he lost. Okay, so he lost this thing. So Jacob is now free, finally, 20 years later. Rachel and Leah and their servants, they're all free to finally go. But Jacob also has another problem he has to deal with to go home, and that is Esau. Esau has forgotten over 20 years. So let's see some stuff that happens here. Jacob went on his way, and the angel of God met him. There's some sort of spiritual things. This is very similar to what also happened when he left. Remember when he left and he was going to Laban's house to find a wife? Who met him on the way? Angels. So here we got angels coming back. Now notice this here. Verse 2, when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. The word camp there is actually plural, and the word in camp in Hebrew means two camps. And so it probably is a little foreshadowing of what's about to happen, because he's going to divide here in a couple of verses down. He's going to divide the camp into half. Half's going to go talk to Esau and half whatever. So he's recognizing what is happening here. So, yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes. All of these names always carry something like Mizpah back there in chapter 31 meant God watches. And it's just kind of symbolic, like Bethel, the place of God. Yep, I think that was just what they did. I don't know if it was something that God did or if it's something they borrowed from being in Canaan. Because here's the deal. All these people, and I don't think this is wrong, we see this, God uses what the people know. For instance, the Ten Commandments. That is not the first written down law in the world of humankind. And I think the Ten Commandments come on board because they're used to having written laws where they had just spent 400 years in Egypt. and we needed some guidance in here. So I think this idea of pillar is definitely a Canaanite thing. You know, this whole idea of sticking that's a Canaanite idea of a like an altar for God, to their gods. And so I think they're using that. I don't know. It just, yeah. I'm supposed to know this. I don't know. Oh, well, that doesn't mean that I know everything in there. Well, he's going to ask for when he gets in wrestling here in just a second with whatever this is that shows up, that's what he's going to ask for as a blessing. I do think he recognizes the angels coming as a divine thing from God, because look at what he says here. It's actually verse 9 when we get to it, but let's go back to verse 3. Jacob sends messengers to Esau because he knows that this is the problem. He instructs them, thus say you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob. Wow, look at how things have changed. You think he would have said this 20 years ago? Absolutely not. I'm not sure if it's a humbling, which probably is a humbling that's taken place, but he has grown in his character and in his wisdom and in his faith, and he is attacking this in a way to try to minimize Esau's anger. Yeah, think about this. Esau has been waiting 20 years for this moment, and Jacob knows it. And he's like, I'm your servant. I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. He's talking about his exile, but I have donkeys, oxen, flocks, male servants, female servants. I have sent to tell my Lord, and in order I may find favor in your sight. So he's basically trying to offer Esau a peace offering. You may call it a bribe, but it's the idea of a peace offering here to try to stop this. And the messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you. And there are 400 men with him. This is modern day militia in this time. He is coming. We're not quite sure at this point. Moses doesn't hint around, but he is coming with the idea that he is coming with backup to take out whatever this situation is. Verse 7, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two camps, which kind of gives that idea back with the angels there, thinking if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then the other camp that is left, they can run off. So basically, he's dividing his people. He says, okay, if we're going to fight, part of these people are going to die, but these other people will be saved. And he's going to divide his family up too in just a second. But I want to get to this. Look at Jacob's prayer. Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred that I may do good. I am not worthy of the least of these deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed the Jordan, and now I have become two camps. What has happened? Completely humbling himself before God. He has come to a place of pure faith. It reminds me probably more of Abraham than it does Isaac, even at this point of when Abraham finally got to the place of his relationship with God. He says, I am not worthy. Now, I want you to go back and pay attention to something in that verse that is interesting in here in verse 10. I'm not worthy of the least of the deeds of two phrases, your steadfast love and all the faithfulness. Okay, there's going to be some words we brought up before and see if you can remember it. Steadfast love is the Hebrew word hesed. It is where in the New Testament we get grace. Faithfulness is the word emnet. It is the word that you will find in your New Testament translated truth. John 1:14. Jesus came full of grace and truth. And if you think about what John is writing from when he is writing in John chapter 1, he's not writing from a New Testament perspective. He is writing from an Old Testament perspective because that's what he grew up in. He grew up in the Jewish faith. And he is pointing back to stories like this that said if God's going to come in the flesh, God is going to come in the flesh just like we saw him before. Jacob is admitting, I'm not worthy of your grace and your faithfulness. Yes. Where? Yes, it seems to be that, yes, there was a two division. Yes. That he divided them in half, basically setting them aside, one part for battle and one part that would save his family. Yeah. And that's what you kind of get with that word back there when he was talking about the angels coming, that this is God's camp, that seemingly there are two sets, even divided the angels for this battle that was coming. But he has come to a place of pure faith and recognizing that what he has is only because of God. And so he says, I didn't have anything, now look at what I have. Verse 11, please deliver me from the hand of my brother and from the hand of Esau, for I fear him that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Well, now what is Jacob saying? What is his plea? And he's also doing what? First of all, what is his plea? Okay. He's asking for protection in the first place of get me out of this. My brother is coming to attack me. I need to be delivered. But he uses what God has said before. God, you can't let this happen to me because you've already promised my offspring is going to be like the sands of the seashore. David makes similar things in the book of Psalms. And so what is Jacob doing? Is he absolutely. That's exactly what I'm getting at. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. That's what he's doing. He is being just like us. May call it bargaining, may call it whatever you want to call it in here. May just be calling God, I'm reminding you of what you promised. Trust me, God knows what he promised. But from his human standpoint is, I'm having this major anxiety. I have this major fear that is upon me. You promised to deliver me because you said this was going to happen. I need you to show up now. And Ken is right. He's doing exactly what we do when we're in a moment of crisis. You know, God, you always promised you would be there. You said you'd never leave us or forsake us, and I need you here. You know, we do that. That comes out in our prayers. And Jacob is doing that. And I think what's happening, it kind of gives us an example of saying, even when we're in those faith moments that are, even people of the Bible that had this great faith, they're just like us. And so we kind of follow into the same pattern here. Verse 13, because I want to see if we can, I'll see if we can get through here so we can get to his wrestling moment here. So he stayed there the night, and from there he took a present, 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their calves, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys. He is handing them over to his servants, and he is basically going to encircle Esau that's coming. So basically Esau is going to walk up here to the middle of this and say, this is basically all yours. And Esau's going to be left with this thing of what do I do here? And so that's kind of what is setting up there. Verse 17, he instructed the first, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you should say they belong to, notice his humility here, your servant, Jacob. Jacob and Esau fought as kids of who was going to be number one. So much so where Esau sells his birthright. Jacob tricks his dad to be number one. Jacob's putting himself in the place of what? How about a New Testament thought for that? What did Jesus come to do? He came not to be served, but to serve. So much so, and this is why I'm loving this study of Genesis, in particular, being the first book of the Old Testament. We have grown up with the God of the Old Testament as this mean God of whatever, and Jesus is in the New Testament's the God of grace. No, God has been the same today, yesterday, today, and forever. His character, his principle, his nature is always the same. And here he is, this God of grace, even to Jacob, and Jacob is recognizing this, and now he is living it out that I am going to be his servant. The one I fought for, I'm going to be his servant. They are a present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and the third, and all who followed in droves. You say to the same thing to Esau when he finds you. Moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us, for he thought, I may appease him with the presence that goes out ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed ahead of him, and he himself stayed in the camp that night. So at this point, Jacob does not know what is going to happen. But where is Jacob's faith now? It is fully entrusted in God. Which leads to the next scene that takes place here. Now, this is a scene that I don't know how many of us really have studied a lot of. This is where Jacob wrestles with something. I'll start by saying that. We'll get into it a little bit there. Yes? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why I see you, look, and that's why there is a beauty, and this is where I think inspiration of God comes in. You see this beauty unfold in this story. It's not like you said, it's not a coincidence that he's a shepherd. It's not a coincidence that Moses, in his time in when he runs away from Egypt, what's he going to be? He's going to be a shepherd. What is David going to do? He's going to be a shepherd. What does David write? The Lord is my shepherd. And so you'll see that theme coming through, and I don't think it's a coincidence that you see this running through. That is why I go back to what John writes in John chapter 1, because that is what they knew. This is how they knew God. This is how we need to know God in our lives. So now we have this scene here that begins in verse 22. So we'll let's see if we can kind of get through this here. I think, we'll be able to get through this here quick. So the same night he arose, took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children. Notice we only got 11. We don't have 12 yet. And crossed the ford of Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. What's he doing? He's protecting his family. He's protecting his offspring. And he's also saying, because here's what Jacob is setting up. And listen, look at what he's doing. This is his character here. Remember, he divided his camp into 2. One of them, they're all out trying to get to Esau. Here's the other one. Everything else I have, go across the stream, go protect yourself. He gave every rest of his wealth to them, and he's going to stay there. So the idea is, if Esau does not accept this and he comes to me, he'll kill me, but you're okay. So that's his mindset. Got to give him up for some character things here, that he's grown a little bit. So, verse 24, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw, and that we're going to come back to that in a minute too. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled him. Who is he wrestling? Okay, so this is the thing. Now, if you go to Hosea chapter 12 and verse 4, Hosea says this is an angel of God that he's wrestling here. which is still God's representatives. It is interesting, though, some of the little things that take place. Why do you think they stopped at daybreak? I want you to think about that. Don't answer this yet. Why do you think he stopped at daybreak? Keep that in the back of your head. And whatever he is, he's strong enough, because remember, Jacob's not a weak man, but he's strong enough and he's recognizing him and Jacob are basically at a draw. I'm going to say this, and Peter, you can bring in some wrestling things in here if you want to. They're at a draw and he cheats. He pokes him in the hip, whatever he does to this hip, and makes it where he can't turn and roll or do whatever wrestling. Okay? Verse 26. Then he said, this is the man talking, let me go, for the day has broken. There that is again. Let's come back up. So that has to mean something. But Jacob said, I will not let you go until you bless me. So he's recognizing him that this is at least a divine creature of some sort. And of course, his faith is going to be in God. So this is something divine from God. And he wants a blessing. Verse 27, and he said, what is your name? He said, my name is Jacob. And then he said, and this goes back to you, what you said a second ago, Ken, Jacob means trickster, manipulator, things like this. And he says, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. And so now he's changing his name to Israel. For you have striven with God and with men, and you have prevailed. So now this is the first time we have Israel being mentioned and having that name. The people here will not go by Israelites until they're in the promised land. So understand that. They're Hebrew people. They will still be called Hebrew people even while they're in Egypt at this point. But when they go down there. So he's wrestling with this, and the man says, you have wrestled and you have striven with God. Okay? Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. And he said there, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. It's a rhetorical question. What do you think the man is saying? If this is a rhetorical question, what is he basically saying here? You know who I am. Keep on going. Now let's hold that back. Verse 30. So Jacob called the name Peniel, or Peniel, however you want to say it, saying, I have seen God face to face. Now we have, and yet my life has been delivered. We got a problem, don't we? What does he tell Moses? What does God tell Moses on the mountain when Moses wants to see God? No one can see my face and live. If this is God, in whatever form he is in, I think that is why there is key that it stops at the break of day. Maybe they're wrestling in the middle of the night, cannot see, and so he cannot see him face to face, whatever that's supposed to look like. And I think that may be why there's a key of saying that he comes back and says, I have seen God face to face, and yet I've been delivered in there. Now, go ahead, Ken, because I know you're probably going to say I'm reaching on that, but maybe.
I mean, he had driven with God.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. And so that's where it gets kind of in here of like, well, God can't be beaten, or he would cease to be God. And so whatever form this is, whether it's an angel himself or whatever, number one, it still shows that Jacob's a very strong man, even at his old age, and that he recognizes at the very least this is someone from God himself. Yes. Correct. Yes. Yes. Right. That is why Hosea calls it the angel of God. It's his messenger. Now, there are some people who says this is a pre-incarnate form of Jesus that's happening here. Similar to when Joshua is standing before the commander and before he's about to go in, the commander of the army that's there, that there's a lot of people who attribute that that's a pre-incarnate form of Jesus. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Whatever it is, at the very least, I agree with what Rachel is saying, that this is a representative of God. And so he's basically in the place of God here for them. Because, going back to this, I've been delivered, verse 31. The sun rose up upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. So now the sun is fully risen. Whoever this messenger is gone. Therefore, to this day, and this is kind of Moses throwing this little piece in there. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh, or that is on the hip. And basically, that's a tendon that's over there in the socket area, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew and of the thigh. So here comes Jacob, comes up limping from this. I don't know. There's another good story. No, I think what you have here is I think there's two things that happen here. I think one, it is showing his relationship with God growing. And even as our relationship with God grows, we may wrestle with God in our own way. I think that there's a piece of that. I think as I've gotten older, I wrestle with God in ways I never would have wrestled with him 20 years ago. As I've gotten older, of that. But that has been because that relationship has grown in that time as well. I think... Knowledge too, absolutely. I think part of it may also have to do with changing the name. Because there is that idea, because what are the people of Israel going to do? They're going to strive with God all throughout their history. Sometimes it's going to be good, sometimes it's going to be bad. I think that there's a purpose behind it of maybe even strengthening Jacob's faith even more in preparation of what's about to come. Because where are we going to end up here in just a few chapters? Joseph, that whole scene that's going to happen, and eventually, getting him to Egypt and everything. I think there has to be a purpose in this with Jacob's faith and his relationship growing and this having it out. And maybe it goes back to him saying and proving to himself that I'm going to be there. Because you notice he wouldn't let him leave till he blessed him. He's like, you're not going anywhere until I go. Correct. Well, and think about that, of happening things at night. That's probably in our roughest moments. That's when things really pick up. Daylight. Think about. You're from Michigan, up in that area. Y'all go through those months in the season of wintertime with no sun hardly, because it's just cloudy, and they call it seasonal depression and everything. But then when the sun comes through, same thing we go through here. Now that we go out there and the pollen is going and the grass is turning green, it kind of just perks everybody up a little bit, right? Everybody who I've talked to, they're like, it's such a good day. I'm ready to go outside. I'm ready to sit by the pool. I'm ready to go do whatever. And it perks us all up. And I think that there is something that is taking place, because when you look at Joseph's dream, when Joseph has his dream, it's going to be at night. Some of the things that Joseph is going to deal with when he's in prison is in a darkness place. And so you have this thing happening in darkness, but ultimately light comes forth through it. And I think there's a imagery there of, like, even in our darkest time, God is there to bring us through on the other end. Yeah, pretty deep. Any questions or comments? Man, this is 2 weeks in a row. I'm letting y'all out a little early. Man, Johnny's not here to get this one man. I gotta get him. All right. So We'll see you Sunday. Don't forget, it's Fifth Sunday. Singing is in Dalton, Central in Dalton. Oh, the ladies' thing here Saturday, yes. Don't